The captain screamed, "We're going to die," as missiles hunted Flight 2847. Passengers said final goodbyes. Then an ordinary woman in faded jeans stood up from seat 34K and entered the cockpit. She grabbed the radio. "This is Viper." The F-22 pilots gasped. The legend was aboard. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The coffee was terrible, but Sarah Morrison drank it anyway. Gate C-47 at Denver International Airport buzzed with the usual chaos of travelers rushing to catch their flights. She sat in a corner seat, her old backpack resting between her worn sneakers, watching people hurry past without a second glance. That's exactly what she wanted. Sarah looked like anyone's middle-aged aunt. Faded jeans. A gray hoodie with a coffee stain on the sleeve. Reading glasses perched on her nose as she scrolled through her phone. Nobody noticed her. Nobody cared. Just another tired traveler heading somewhere ordinary. But 18 months ago, Sarah Morrison had been Lieutenant Colonel Morrison. Call sign, Viper. One of the most decorated fighter pilots in the United States Air Force. Now boarding Flight 2847 to San Diego, the gate agent announced. Sarah grabbed her backpack and joined the line. She handed over her boarding pass without making eye contact. The flight attendant smiled that professional, automatic smile and waved her through. Seat 34K. Window seat in economy class. Sarah squeezed past a businessman already buried in his laptop and a college girl with earbuds in, nodding to music only she could hear. She stuffed her backpack overhead, buckled in, and stared out the window at the tarmac. 4 hours to San Diego. One boring consulting meeting tomorrow morning. Then home. Simple. Anonymous. Normal. Everything she'd wanted when she walked away from the military. For 22 years, Sarah had lived a different life. She'd flown F-15 Strike Eagles through combat zones in the Middle East. She'd completed 147 combat missions. She'd saved countless lives with precision strikes and close air support. She'd trained other pilots at Nellis Air Force Base, teaching tactics that became standard doctrine. Her call sign, Viper, was legendary. Young pilots studied her missions. Commanders referenced her innovations. She was Air Force royalty. And then, at 42, she'd retired. Everyone was shocked. Viper leaving at the peak of her career. Some thought she'd burned out. Others whispered about family problems. A few understood the truth. 22 years of combat takes pieces of your soul, and Sarah wanted to keep whatever pieces she had left. So she'd taken a civilian job. Defense contractor. Good pay, boring work. No one shooting missiles at her. No one depending on her split-second decisions to stay alive. Her 16-year-old daughter, Emma, didn't even know. Sarah had never told her about the combat tours, the medals, the call sign that made veteran pilots stand at attention. Emma thought her mom had worked a desk job in the Air Force and now did boring computer stuff. That's what normal mothers did. They didn't dodge missiles. The plane pushed back from the gate. Sarah barely noticed. She was reading technical documents for tomorrow's meeting, some radar system she needed to evaluate. The businessman next to her typed frantically. The college girl changed songs. The takeoff was smooth. Sarah felt the acceleration, the rotation, the wheels leaving the ground. Her fighter pilot brain automatically critiqued the commercial procedures, too gentle, too slow, prioritizing passenger comfort over performance. But that wasn't her world anymore. The plane climbed to 41,000 feet and leveled off. Sarah dozed. Watched a movie without really paying attention. Ate the terrible airplane pretzels. 4 hours passed in that weird airplane time warp where everything feels suspended. Then she heard the change in the captain's voice. Sarah was instantly awake. Not because of the words, she hadn't processed them yet. But because of the tone. The crack in professional composure. The edge of raw terror. Fighter pilots spend years learning to hear that sound. Send help, the captain's voice exploded over the intercom. We don't know what to do. Missiles inbound. We're going to die. Somebody please help us. The cabin erupted. A woman 3 rows ahead started sobbing. The businessman next to Sarah went ghost white. The college girl ripped out her earbuds, looking around in confusion and terror. Throughout the plane, passengers screamed, cried, grabbed their phones to call loved ones and say goodbye. Their captain, the trained professional responsible for their safety, had just told them they were about to die. Sarah's combat brain kicked into overdrive. Captain says, send help equals external threat. Captain says, we don't know what to do equals beyond commercial training. Captain says, missiles inbound equals military attack. They were under attack. At 41,000 feet. With 298 people aboard. And she was the only person on this plane who knew how to fight back. Sarah sat frozen for exactly 3 seconds. 18 months of carefully built anonymity. 18 months of being just Sarah, not Viper. 18 months of her daughter having a normal mom. All of it would be destroyed the moment she revealed herself. But 298 people were about to die. She unbuckled and ran. Sarah pushed through the panicking passengers with military urgency. A flight attendant tried to stop her at the cockpit door. I'm a former Air Force fighter pilot, Sarah said, her voice carrying command authority she hadn't used in 18 months. Open this door now. Something in Sarah's face made the flight attendant obey. She used her key. The door opened. Inside, chaos. The captain sat frozen at the controls, hands shaking, face white with terror. The first officer was on the radio, voice barely holding together. Between them, a tactical display showed 3 missile tracks converging on their position. Less than 4 minutes to impact. Someone had just tried to shoot down a civilian airliner with military weapons. Sarah stepped to the center console and grabbed the radio. Raptor lead, this is Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Morrison, call sign Viper, retired Air Force, former F-15 Strike Eagle driver. I'm aboard this aircraft. Transmit full tactical picture. I'll coordinate defensive maneuvers from here. 2 seconds of stunned silence. Then, Viper. Ma'am, is that actually you? Holy. The F-22 pilot's voice transformed mid-sentence, from tactical coordination to something like religious awe. Ma'am, we're 18 minutes out from your position. Those missiles reach you in 3 minutes 20 seconds. You're the only person who can save that aircraft right now. Every F-22 pilot in the Air Force knew that call sign. Viper was taught at fighter school. Her tactics were studied. Her combat record was legendary. Finding out she was aboard the threatened plane was like discovering Michael Jordan was available for your pickup basketball game. Except the stakes were 298 lives. Sarah turned to the captain with absolute authority. Captain, I need you to follow my control inputs exactly. No questions, no hesitation. Your commercial training doesn't cover this. My combat experience does. Do exactly what I say or everyone dies. The captain stared at her, his world completely shattered. A passenger was taking command to evade military missiles. The aircraft can't, he started. The aircraft can handle more than you've explored, Sarah interrupted. Commercial aviation never faces combat. I know this airframe's actual capabilities. Give me the controls or we're dead in 2 minutes. He surrendered. Sarah took the controls with hands that had flown combat missions through missile threats for 22 years. The massive airliner wasn't a fighter jet. It couldn't pull sharp turns or accelerate vertically. But it had capabilities airlines never explored because commercial aviation operated in peaceful skies. Sarah was about to change that. Raptor lead, give me missile details. Range, speed, Guidance Systems. First missile is radar-guided, range 12 nautical miles, closing at Mach 3.5. Second missile is infrared-guided, same closure rate. Third missile, radar-guided. They're staggered for sequential engagement. Whoever launched these knows what they're doing. Sarah's combat brain processed the tactical picture instantly. 3 missiles meant defeating one wouldn't save them. She needed to defeat all 3 using an aircraft that weighed 600,000 pounds and had the maneuverability of a flying office building. Her experience screamed it was impossible. Her genius started calculating how to make impossible merely improbable. Captain, when I call for bank, give me maximum bank rate without structural failure. First officer, when I call for power reduction, pull throttles to idle instantly. We're going to execute maneuvers that will throw passengers around and make this aircraft groan. But we won't exceed structural limits. Behind them, the cabin had descended into chaos. Passengers screaming, praying, accepting death. Flight attendants had given up trying to maintain calm. First officer, increase to maximum cruise speed. I need every knot you can give me. The throttles advanced. The aircraft accelerated with ponderous momentum. Sarah watched the airspeed climb while monitoring missile range. She was buying energy, the fundamental currency of aerial combat. Raptor lead, can you deploy chaff? Negative, Viper. We're still 14 minutes out. You're on your own for the first missile. She'd expected that. First missile would be pure evasion. Her timing against the missile's guidance system. First missile, range 4 nautical miles. Sarah watched the track converge. Her combat experience measured closure rate against her planned defensive maneuver. She was waiting for exactly the right moment, when the missile committed to its final approach and lost the ability to adjust. Too early and the missile would compensate. Too late and they'd be inside minimum range where evasion became impossible. Range 2 nautical miles. The businessman in 34J would never know his survival depended on split-second timing developed through years of combat. Range 1 nautical mile. Sarah's hand moved to the controls. Her tactical sense measuring convergence with precision that transcended conscious thought. Mark. She rolled the aircraft into maximum bank left. The massive airliner responding with reluctant momentum, banking steeper than it had in its entire service life, pushing toward angles commercial manuals labeled dangerous. Coffee cups exploded across the cabin. Passengers slammed against seatbelts. Overhead bins popped open. The airframe groaned under stress. Screams filled the cabin as 298 people felt their world tilt at impossible angles. The first missile streaked past their left wing. 430 feet distance. Close enough that passengers saw the contrail. Close enough that the proximity fuse nearly detonated. Another second of delay would have meant fireball. But Sarah's timing had put the aircraft exactly where the missile's guidance couldn't predict. Raptor lead, first missile defeated. Viper, you just evaded an advanced SAM using a commercial aircraft. That's not in any manual we've got. How? No time, Raptor lead. Second missile is infrared guided. It's tracking our heat signature. I need altitude separation now. Sarah rolled back toward level while checking the tactical display. Second missile was closer. Less than 40 seconds to impact. Infrared guidance meant it was following their engine heat. She needed to put the aircraft somewhere the missile couldn't follow. First officer, idle power when I say. Captain, we're diving at rates commercial pilots never practice. Trust me. A dive? The captain's voice cracked. We're at 41,000 feet. We're going below the missile's minimum engagement envelope. But we need to get there in 30 seconds. Sarah didn't wait for agreement. Idle power now. The throttles snapped to idle. The massive engine spooled down. The aircraft transitioned from powered flight to controlled descent. Sarah pushed the nose down aggressively. The altimeter unwound as they dropped through 40,000 feet. 39,000, 38,000. Descending at rates that made the airframe buffet and passengers scream and oxygen masks deploy automatically. Throughout the cabin, 298 people experienced what it felt like when a commercial aircraft behaved like a combat jet. Second missile, range 8,000 feet. It's following your dive, Viper. Sarah watched the altitude indicator spin while monitoring descent rate. Infrared missiles had minimum altitude parameters where their guidance failed. She was racing to reach that threshold. 36,000 feet. 34,000, 32,000. Missile range 4,000 feet. The missile was closing faster than they were descending. She'd miscalculated. Sarah shoved the nose down harder, exceeding her planned descent rate, pushing into flight envelope regions where commercial aircraft rarely ventured. Being cautious meant dying. Being aggressive might save everyone. 28,000, 26,000. 24,000. The cabin altitude system screamed warnings. Passengers hyperventilated into oxygen masks. The airframe groaned. The captain watched his instruments with horror, certain they'd tear the wings off. Sarah held the dive. 22,000 feet. Missile range 1,000 feet. 20,000 feet. 19,000 feet. The second missile lost tracking lock. Its infrared guidance, optimized for high altitude, suddenly confronted the thermal clutter of lower atmosphere where ground heat confused its sensor. The missile detonated 1,200 feet above them. Close enough to rock them with shockwave. Far enough that fragmentation passed harmlessly overhead. Second missile defeated. Sarah pulled out of the dive, the massive aircraft groaning as she transitioned from descent to level flight. The captain helped manage recovery, his terror giving way to stunned realization that the impossible maneuvers had actually worked. Viper, you just defeated infrared tracking using altitude separation. That's graduate-level tactical flying with a commercial aircraft. Third missile is radar-guided, range 6 nautical miles. We're 9 minutes out, but Raptor 3 is extending. He might reach chaff deployment range before impact. Sarah checked their altitude. 19,000 feet. Room to maneuver. The third missile was tracking their radar signature. Defeating it required countermeasures or sudden maneuvers that created tracking errors. She had one chance left. Raptor 3, what's your ETA to chaff range? A younger voice responded. Viper, Raptor 3. I can reach effective range in 2 minutes 30 seconds. But that missile will be inside minimum safe separation in 2 minutes 15 seconds. The difference between successful countermeasures and missile impact would come down to 15 seconds of physics. Raptor 3, I'm going to execute banking maneuvers to delay the missile's optimal approach. You get into chaff range and deploy on my call. We only get one shot. Roger, Viper. Raptor 3 is maximum speed. Sarah began a tactical jinking pattern, left bank 30 degrees, hold 4 seconds, reverse to right bank 30 degrees, creating unpredictable course changes that forced the missile's guidance to constantly recalculate. Each change added computational delays, accumulated errors, pushed the missile's approach slightly further from optimal. The passengers had stopped screaming. Most sat in stunned silence, oxygen masks still deployed, aware that something dramatic was happening but unable to comprehend the tactical dance between their aircraft and the missile hunting them. Missile range 3 nautical miles. Sarah maintained the jinking pattern, her hands moving with practiced precision. Range 2 nautical miles. Raptor 3, 90 seconds to chaff range. She increased the banking angle, forcing sharper course changes, accepting passenger discomfort in exchange for greater tracking errors. Range 1 nautical mile. Raptor 3, 45 seconds to chaff range. Too close. The missile would reach minimum engagement range before Raptor 3 could deploy countermeasures. Sarah made the calculation instantly. She needed one aggressive defensive maneuver at exactly the moment when Raptor 3's chaff could exploit the vulnerability. Raptor 3, on my mark, I'm executing maximum bank right with simultaneous altitude gain. Deploy chaff the moment you reach range. Don't wait. We're out of time. Roger, Viper. Raptor 3 ready. 30 seconds to range. Range 6,000 feet. Sarah's hands positioned for the defensive maneuver. Her combat instincts measured convergence angles and a 15-second window that would determine whether 298 people lived or died. Range 4,000 feet. Raptor 3, 15 seconds. Mark in 10 seconds, Sarah said, her voice carrying tactical calm. Range 2,000 feet. Raptor 3, 10 seconds. The missile was accelerating for final approach. Inside the cockpit, Sarah counted down with precision. 5, 4, 3, 2. Mark. She rolled the aircraft into maximum bank right while simultaneously pulling the nose up. The massive airliner responding as she pushed it toward performance limits. The maneuver forced the missile's guidance into extended tracking calculation. At exactly that moment, Raptor 3's chaff system deployed, bundles of metallic strips exploding into the air, creating thousands of radar reflections that turned the missile's guidance picture into chaos. The missile's computer confronted a target executing an impossible maneuver while surrounded by false radar returns. It lost lock. The missile tried desperately to reacquire, but Sarah's timing had been perfect. The warhead detonated 800 feet away, triggered by chaff returns rather than actual aircraft proximity. Close enough to shake them. Far enough that fragmentation dispersed harmlessly. Third missile defeated. The F-22 pilot's voice exploded with triumph. Viper, you just saved 298 people by flying a commercial aircraft like a combat platform. Ma'am, that's going in the history books. Sarah let out breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Behind her, the captain was crying with relief. The first officer was laughing, almost hysterical. Through the cockpit door, she could hear the cabin erupting in confused celebration. Raptor lead, Viper. Status of launch platform. Viper, we've destroyed the launch site. Threat is neutralized. We're forming up for escort to your emergency landing. There was a pause. Ma'am, Raptor flight requests permission to render salute formation. What you just accomplished deserves recognition. Raptor lead, that's unnecessary. Ma'am, with respect, it's happening whether you approve or not. Sarah looked out the cockpit window and watched as 4 F-22 Raptors materialized from the sky. Fifth-generation stealth fighters moving into diamond formation with the commercial aircraft at center. Military warriors rendering aerial salute to the legendary aviator whose retirement had just ended in the most dramatic way possible. Throughout the cabin, passengers pressed against windows to watch, not understanding that the fighters were honoring the ordinary woman from seat 34K who'd saved them all. The emergency landing was smooth. Fire trucks surrounded them as they taxied. News helicopters circled overhead. When Sarah finally emerged into the cabin, 298 pairs of eyes turned toward her. The businessman from 34J stood first. You saved us. That was you giving orders up there. Sarah nodded slowly. Her 18 months of anonymity evaporating. Someone started clapping. Others joined. Within seconds, the entire cabin was applauding, some crying, others trying to approach and say thank you. At the gate, Air Force officers in dress uniforms waited. One was a colonel who'd been her student years ago. He saluted sharply. Ma'am, the Air Force requests your consultation on commercial aircraft defensive capabilities. What you demonstrated will reshape how we think about civilian vulnerability. Colonel, I'm retired. Ma'am, with respect, you're Viper. And those people are alive because you stopped pretending otherwise. Her phone buzzed. Emma's text, Mom, are you okay? It's all over the news. They're saying you saved everyone, that you flew fighters. I didn't even know you were in the military. Why didn't you tell me?" Sarah stared at the text. Her daughter's confusion and hurt. The weight of secrets kept for 18 months now exposed. How do you explain to your daughter that you spent 22 years in combat but never mentioned it because you wanted her to have a normal childhood? 2 weeks later, Sarah stood in Air Force dress blues for the first time in 18 months, being officially reinstated as Lieutenant Colonel Morrison, Special Consultant on Commercial Aviation Defensive Systems. The ceremony was small. Senior officers. A few journalists. And Emma, watching from the front row with pride that made Sarah's heart ache. The assignment came with immediate deployment to Nellis Air Force Base, where she would lead development of tactical doctrine for commercial aircraft defensive capabilities. The work consumed her with intensity she'd forgotten was possible. She flew test profiles in commercial aircraft, pushing platforms through tactical maneuvers. She coordinated with airline pilots to develop emergency procedures. She briefed Congress on aviation vulnerability. Her innovations from Flight 2847 formed the foundation for entirely new doctrine. 6 months later, she met Captain Rodriguez, the commercial pilot who'd screamed for help, at a coffee shop near Nellis. "I've been flying for 20 years, he said quietly. "After what happened, I almost quit. I was ashamed I couldn't protect my passengers myself." "You survived by being smart enough to accept help," Sarah replied. "That took more courage than any tactical maneuver. The airline wants me to help with your training program. Teaching commercial pilots defensive awareness. Would you work with me?" Sarah smiled. "Captain, I'd be honored." They became collaborators, combining his commercial expertise with her combat tactics to create the first-ever defensive flying program for civilian pilots. 8 months after Flight 2847, Sarah attended a reunion of the passengers she'd saved. The 298 Club, they called themselves. Walking into that room, seeing the businessman from 34J playing with his grandson born 4 months after the flight, seeing the college girl from 34H who'd graduated because she survived, seeing all the ordinary lives that continued, it gave her perspective. An older woman approached, tears streaming. "My daughter was on that flight. She called me when the captain started screaming, certain she was about to die. Then somehow, impossibly, she survived. You gave me my daughter back." Sarah felt her own tears forming. "You don't need to thank me. You just need to live well." Late that evening, Sarah stood on the hotel balcony watching aircraft approach the airport. Commercial jets carrying hundreds of passengers who would never know how vulnerable they were. Her phone buzzed. Emma's text, "How was the reunion? Are you okay?" Sarah smiled, texting back, "I'm good, sweetheart. Just realizing that being Viper isn't a burden to escape. It's a capability to use when needed. See you tomorrow." She watched another aircraft descend, navigation lights blinking in darkness, and felt at peace with her identity for the first time since retirement. She was Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Morrison. Call sign, Viper. Retired from active duty, but never truly retired from the obligations that came with being exceptional at saving lives. Some legends retire. Some just wait for the moment when they're needed again. She'd waited 18 months in comfortable anonymity. Then 298 lives had demanded Viper emerge one more time. The captain had screamed for help until F-22s recognized her call sign and transformed from coordinators to supporters. Until she saved everyone through combat expertise applied to commercial emergency. Until the legend proved that some capabilities transcend retirement and civilian clothes and trying to be ordinary. Viper was back. Not because the Air Force forced it. Not because duty demanded it. But because saving 298 innocent lives reminded her that exceptional capabilities carry obligations that matter more than comfortable anonymity. And somewhere in the sky above, commercial aircraft continued flying peaceful routes, protected now by doctrine and training and procedures that existed because a legendary aviator had been aboard when missiles threatened. When the captain broke down screaming. When split-second tactical decisions saved everyone. The woman in seat 34K had changed commercial aviation forever. And Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Viper Morrison had finally accepted that changing the world was worth sacrificing the anonymity she'd built trying to escape her own legend.